This creature was trying to take her world. All witches are selfish, the Queen had said. But Tiffany's third thought said, then turn selfishness into a weapon. Make all things yours. Make other lives and dreams and hopes yours. Protect them. Save them. Bring them into the sheepfold. Walk the gale for them. Keep away the wolf. My dreams, my brother, my family, my land, my world. How dare you try to take these things, because they are mine. I have a duty. The anger overflowed. She stood up, clenched her fists, and screamed at the storm, putting into the scream all the rage that was inside her. Lightning struck the ground on either side of her. It did so twice, and it stayed there, crackling, and two dogs formed. Steam rose from their coats, and blue light sparkled from their ears as they shook themselves. They looked attentively at Tiffany. The Queen gasped and vanished. Come by, lightning, shouted Tiffany. Away to me, thunder. And she remembered the time when she'd run across the downs, falling over, shouting all the wrong things, while the two dogs had done exactly what needed to be done. Two streaks of black and white sped away across the turf and up towards the clouds. They herded the storm. Clouds panicked and scattered, but always there was a comet streaking across the sky, and they were turned. Monstrous shapes writhed and screamed in the boiling sky, but thunder and lightning had worked many flocks. There was an occasional snap of lightning, sparked teeth, and a wail. Tiffany stared upwards, rain pouring off her face, and shouted commands that no dog could possibly have heard. Jostling and rumbling and screaming, the storm rolled off the hills and away towards the mountains, where there were deep canyons that could pen it. Out of breath, glowing with triumph, Tiffany watched until the dogs came back and settled, once again, on the turf. And then she remembered something else. It didn't matter what orders she gave those dogs. They were not her dogs. They were working dogs. Thunder and lightning didn't take orders from a little girl, and the dogs weren't looking at her. They were looking just behind her. She'd have turned if someone had told her a horrible monster was behind her. She'd have turned if they'd said it had 1,000 teeth. She didn't want to turn round now. Forcing herself was the hardest thing she'd ever done. She was not afraid of what she might see. She was terribly, mortally frightened, afraid to the centre of her bones of what she might not see. She shut her eyes while her cowardly boots shuffled her round, and then, after a deep breath, she opened them again. There was a gust of jolly sailor tobacco, and sheep, and turpentine. Sparkling in the dark, light glittering off the white shepherdess dress, and every blue ribbon and silver buckle of it, was Granny Aiken, smiling hugely, glowing with pride. In one hand she held a huge ornamental crook, hung with blue bows. She pirouetted slowly, and Tiffany saw that while she was a brilliant glowing shepherdess from hat to hem, she still had her huge old boots on. Granny Aiken took her pipe out of her mouth and gave Tiffany the little nod that was, from her, a round of applause. And then she wasn't. Real starlit darkness covered the turf, and the nighttime sounds filled the air. Tiffany didn't know if what had just happened was a dream, or had happened somewhere that wasn't quite here, or had only happened in her head. It didn't matter. It had happened. And now, but I'm still here, said the Queen, stepping in front of her. Perhaps it was all a dream. Perhaps you have gone a little mad, because you are, after all, a very strange child. Perhaps you had help. How good are you? Do you really think that you can face me alone? I can make you think whatever I please. Crevens! Oh, no, not them, said the Queen, throwing up her hands. It wasn't just the knack-knack Feegles, but also Wentworth, a strong smell of seaweed, a lot of water, and a dead shark. They appeared in mid-air and landed in a heap between Tiffany and the Queen, but a pixie was always ready for a fight, and they bounced, rolled, and came up drawing their swords, shaking sea-water out of their hair. "Oh, 'tis you, sir," said Rob Anybody, glaring up at the Queen. Face to face with ye at last, ye blusty old galliac that ye are. Ye canna come here, understand? Be off with ye. Are ye going to go quietly? The Queen stamped heavily on him. When she took her foot away, only the top of his head was visible above the turf. Well, are ye? He said, pulling himself out as if nothing had happened. Don't want to have to lose my temper with ye, and it's no good sending your pets against us, 'cause ye ken we can take him to the cleaners. He turned to Tiffany, who hadn't moved. You just leave this to us, Gelder. Us and the Queen. We go way back. The Queen snapped her fingers. Always leaping into things you don't understand, she hissed. Well, can you face these? Every Knack-Mack Feegle's sword suddenly glowed blue. Back in the crowd of eerily lit pixies, a voice that sounded very much like that of Daft Willie said, Ach, we're in real trouble now. 3 figures had appeared in the air, a little way away. The middle one, Tiffany saw, had a long red gown, a strange long wig, and black tights with buckles on his shoes. The others were just ordinary men, it seemed, in ordinary grey suits. Oh, you're a hard woman, Quinn, said William the Gonigal, to set the lawyers on to us. See the one on the left there, whimpered a pixie. See, he's got a briefcase. That's a briefcase. Oh, whaley, whaley, a briefcase, whaley. Reluctantly, a step at a time, pressing together in terror, the Knack-Mack Feegles began to back away. Oh, whaley, whaley, snapping the clasps, groaned Daft Willie. Oh, whaley, 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 'tis the sound of doom when a lawyer does that. Mr. Rob Anybody Feegle and sundry others, said one of the figures in a voice of dread. There's naebody here o' that name, shouted Rob Anybody. We dinna know anything. We have heard a list of criminal and civil charges, totalling 19,763 separate offences. We wasn't here, yelled Rob Anybody, desperately. Isn't that right, lads? Including more than 2,000 cases of making an affray, causing a public nuisance, being found drunk, being found very drunk, using offensive language, taking into account 97 counts of using language that was probably offensive if anyone else could understand it, committing a breach of the peace, malicious lingering. That's mistaken identity, shouted Rob Anybody. It's no our fault. We was only standing there and someone else did it and ran away. Grand theft, petty theft, burglary, housebreaking, loitering with intent to commit a felony. We was misunderstood when we was wee bairns, yelled Rob Anybody. You're only picking on us 'cause we're blue. We always get blamed for everything. The police hate us. We wasn't even in the country. But to groans from the cowering pixies, one of the lawyers produced a big roll of paper from his briefcase. He cleared his throat and read out, Angus, big. Angus, no as big Angus. Angus, wee. Archie, big. Archie, one-eyed. Archie, wee mad. They've got our names, sobbed Daft Willie. They've got our names. That's the prison house for us. Objection. I move for a writ of habeas corpus, said a small voice. An enter plea of visni faciam compit repletum, without prejudice. There was absolute silence for a moment. Rob Anybody turned to look at the frightened Knack-Mack Feegles and said, Okay, which one of you said that? The toad crawled out of the crowd and sighed. It suddenly all came back to me, he said. I remember what I was now. The legal language brought it all back. I'm a toad now, but, it swallowed, once I was a lawyer. And this people is illegal. These charges are a complete tissue of lies based on hearsay evidence. It raised yellow eyes towards the Queen's lawyers. I further move that the case is adjourned sine die on the basis of potest matter te suo amici. The lawyers had pulled large books out of nowhere and were thumbing through them hastily. We're not familiar with counsel's terminology, said one of them. Hey, they're swatting, said Rob Anybody. You mean we can have lawyers on our side as well? Yes, of course, said the toad. You can have defence lawyers. Defence? Said Rob Anybody. Are you telling me we could get away with it because of tissue of lies? Certainly, said the Toad, and with all the treasure you've stolen you can pay enough to be very innocent indeed. My fee will be... It gulped as a dozen glowing swords were swung towards him. I've just remembered why that fairy godmother turned me into a toad, it said. So in the circumstances, I'll take this case pro bono publico. The swords didn't move. That means free, it added. All right, we like the sound of that, said Rob Anybody, to the sound of swords being sheathed. How come you're a lawyer and a toad? Oh, well, it was just a bit of an argument, said the Toad. Fairy godmother gave my client 3 wishes, the usual health, wealth and happiness package. When my client woke up one wet morning and didn't feel particularly happy, she got me to bring an action for breach of contract. It was a definite first in the history of fairy godmothering. Unfortunately, as it turned out, so was turning the client into a small hand mirror, and her lawyer, as you see before you, into a toad. I think the worst part was when the judge applauded, and that was hurtful in my opinion. But you can still remember all that legal stuff. Did? Said Rob Anybody. He glared at the other lawyers. Hey, you skunners, we got a cheap lawyer, and we're not afraid to use him with prejudice. The other lawyers were pulling more and more paperwork out of the air now. They looked worried and a little frightened. Rob Anybody's eyes gleamed as he watched them. What does all that visni facium stuff mean, my learned friend? He said. Visni facium capiti repletum, said the Toad. It was the best I could do in a hurry, but it means approximately, he gave a little cough, would you like a face which is full of head? And to think we didn't no legal talking was that simple, said Rob Anybody. We could all be lawyers, lads, if we knew the fancy words. Let's get them. The Knack-Mack Feegle could change mood in a moment, especially at the sound of a battle cry. They raised their swords in the air. 1,200 angry men, they shouted. Nemo quatrum drama. We have the law on our side. The law's made to take care of ratskins. No, said the Queen, and waved her hand. Lawyers and pixies faded away. There was just her and Tiffany facing one another on the turf at dawn, the wind hissing around the stones.